Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to continue where I left off showing you the Reserve Fillmore valve. I'm going to pronounce it correctly, or at least in the correct order. Reserve is the brand name, Fillmore is the model of valve or type of valve. I'm going to use my Salsa front wheel here. I've unseated both sides so there's no seating going on. Sometimes I put a tube in and get one side seated, and then I unseat the other side, take the tube out, and then that way when I put air in it I only have one side to seat. But this time we're gonna just start with a completely unseated tire and see if my standard pump can do the job. That's this one here. You can see it's skinnier. It's just a normal low volume pump. Low volume, high pressure, so it goes up to 120 psi required if you have like a road bike or something like that. And then this pump, if that pump doesn't work, is a high volume pump. This is for fat bikes, things like that. It maxes out at 30 psi, which is really, even on my mountain bikes, I never go over 30. I go up to, usually 21 in the front, 24 in the rear is my standard kind of air pressures. And on my fat bike, 12 is usually the highest I ever go. So kind of nice to have one of these handy if you want to have more air going to your tire, and it helps seat tubeless tires easier. But we're going to try it with just a regular standard pump to see if this Fillmore valve actually allows more air in there. Before we talk about that, here's the standard valve that I took out, and I don't know if you can really see this in the video, but there's a lot of like gunk on there from the sealant, or I like to oftentimes call it goop because it's very goopy, it gets sticky. It hasn't really plugged the hole, but you can see how it sticks all around here. But where you really see it is it gets in here inside of the core and blocks some of the airflow, and that's part of the problem, is your valve can get clogged by your sealant. The very thing to keep you from getting flats also keeps you from putting air in your tires sometimes. So the Fillmore valve gets away from that by having this opening at the bottom here at the base. And if you see my previous video, I explained the differences between the two valves and how they work. If you're interested in those details, that video will be linked at the end of this one. Okay, so as you can see here, I have the Fillmore valve on here. So I already installed that. The tire is unseated on this side and it's unseated on this side. Of course, I have to push this into the rim, but I want you to see that the tire is completely unseated. And I added some more sealant in there, so I just have to be a little careful. The old sealant, you can see, is kind of making a mess. There. You shouldn't have to use tire lever to install your tires. Let's wipe this off. Okay, so I have a completely unseated. Neither side is seated yet, and we're just going to test this out with a standard pump. It's a true test right here of whether these valves are all what they are cracked up to be. So I can tell right now I have way more airflow going in there just from the standard pump. Oh, and the tire is inflating. Oh wow, that is like a huge night and day difference between the other valve. The other valve, it just popped in both sides. Oh, there it is. Always a little nerve-wracking when they pop into place. It is sealed. The tire seated with the standard pump, just like that. And I can just feel the air go in. I was doing that one-handed. Like normally with the other valve, it's like I can feel the back pressure pushing back against me and not letting as much air in there as I would like. So we're just going to go up to my normal 21. There we go. Pop this off. Okay, so here's another thing to take note. I don't have the cap on there yet. If you saw my first video, when I put the cap on, the cap grabs this little valve, whatever you want to call this piece. I don't know what you call this little trigger. Now, it is not letting air out, so somehow the pressure inside the tire is pushing this closed, and so the only way air can go in is when you put the pump on there, it pushes that, and you can just treat it like a normal tire. Wow, does a lot of air come out. I probably should pump that back up to my 21, right? So let's see in that short amount of time how much air. I dropped that almost 10 psi just from those couple of pushes, because the airflow is so good that it just comes out, which is another thing. A lot of times I'm trying to let air out of my tire and it's like doesn't want to really come out very easily, especially once you get sealant up in your valve. So I'm already really impressed. So now that we know this works like just a normal everyday valve in this instance, we want to put the cap on. We don't want to just leave this open. I mean, that's open right there for stuff to get inside. So with these valves, I would not recommend ever riding without the cap. So do not lose the cap. The cap actually grabs that little, trigger piece and pulls it tight and pulls the whole shaft or cone down and seals it at the top. So that gives you a second layer of sealing the valve. And then of course this little dial on here or screw tightens the valve against the rim, and you want that nice and snug so air doesn't leak at your valve. So there it is. It's in there. Feels really good. I like it. I'm pretty impressed. Yeah. So now that thing's ready to install back on my bike. So what we have here is there's the old valve, and this is the one that will go on the rear. So I'm going to switch that out here in a moment. But this is the new Fillmore valve. Here's the package if you're curious. So Reserve, it's actually Reserve Wheels. I don't know if that's the website, reservewheels.com. I believe it is. I'll put a link to these in the comments. And then you get 2 per package, which makes sense because you have 2 wheels. This little graphic here, if you want to look at it for a second, kind of shows you the difference in the valves. So that's kind of cool. You can see how this doesn't allow a whole lot of air and how the new one has a lot more airflow going through it. And that where I showed you how mine was getting clogged up, right up in here is where the old valve, this style one, gets clogged. And in here, the only place though for it to get clogged would be down in here. But then anytime you push this, it's going to break that seal free. So even if the sealant does clog that up, you just break it free the moment you push that down or the moment you put your pump lever on there. So it's pretty slick. I really like this idea. It's nice to see something like this evolve, because it's been like this for so many years, which is fine when you have inner tubes, but now that we have tubeless, this design starts to fail pretty miserably, as we have seen. So there you have it. That thing is ready to go. I'm going to clean it up, install it on my bike, and get to working on the rear. I really appreciate your support for my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace.